actually see what those timeframes look like, see, what the YMAV expiration dates were, marry that against, your training calendars, and you could match up the P and the T and make sure that we were actually going to have adequate personnel who were trained and ready to move into those training events that you might have. So we thought that was a great news story. Again, what the YMAV really is number one, it's a conversation starter between the NCO and his PD NCO. Number two, it provides predictability not only to our NCOs and their families, but also to our commands, because now you out in the field can actually see what those dates look like and when those cliffs or those challenges are going to come across your formation. And then the third point is that we wanted you to know that NCO YMAV is a contract between EPMD and the soldier, but also EPMD and the unit. So just for your edification, if an NCO submits paperwork, all the necessary paperwork, and wants to extend their YMAV or adjust their YMAV, my team will look at that here and make a decision on that, and 9 times out of 10 will approve that change. If we are going to change that from here in EP, if I need to adjust somebody's YMAV to meet a DASSER or drill sergeant requirement or some other requirement, then that request for YMAV ETP comes to me as the director of EP for approval. So what I want you to understand in the field is that YMAV is a contract, and we don't break that contract willy-nilly. And it's not like, the time on station waivers we used to do and things like that, where we just change those at will. That YMAV is literally a contract, and we try to keep that in place hard and fast as possible. Does that mean we're always able to do that? No, there are going to be times because of readiness that we need to adjust a YMAV. But again, my PD NCOs understand that is a conversation. We just don't go into the system and adjust that without contacting the NCO and actually having that conversation with the NCO to at least, number one, inform the NCO, but number two, get their feedback. So we think that's a great news story. We think that'll provide better predictability across the board in the out years. But again, just kind of those growing pains that we're going through now to bring that online. The next goal bar, CD and crew stabilization. I think most of you are probably tracking that. I won't spend too much time on it. But what I will say is we need units to utilize those tools. When I was a G1 at both the Corps and division level, I used to get beat up daily by my brigade and division commanders, because they'd go out and get folks trained. They go to the National Training Center, come back, and then they'd accuse me of moving all their folks once they got back. So that really wasn't the case, as you well know. It wasn't like I, scoped out those people and made a move. But what we wanted to do was provide a lever or several levers to our folks in the field, to commanders in the field, to be able to, number one, when you move into a career development position or a KD position, that you would be able to stabilize that person in that KD or CD billet for the duration of their career development position, and then a couple months to be able to allow them to rotate. And then the other thing was on the crew stabilization was we wanted to be able to go in and stabilize crews as well, or request that those crews be stabilized. Again, 2 levers. We think those are great. Again, big thing is we just need to utilize them, because what that does is that adjusts the YMAV and allows that YMAV then not to move into the original position in the marketplace where it would have been, and it moves it out and allows that NCO to stay in place longer than they needed to begin with. And I have 2 additional slides next that you can use as reference for each one of those as needed.
Hey, sir, sorry to Neil again. Before we move on CD stabilization, couple things. One, when you look this up on the HRC website, it is targeted toward FORCECOM units only. Nothing against FORCECOM units, but we have other divisions out there that we've tried to leverage CD stabilizations on, and we have some mixed messaging from what you say to the field and what's actually ground truth and happens within the branches, because we have problems getting this in the OCONUS entities. Again, it goes back to DROS issues, because they are the branches are focused on CD stabilization and FORCECOM, and not with USER AF and USER PAC and INDOPACOM, because I fight this constantly when we send our requests up.
Yeah, hey, sir. So, so I talked with Colonel Harris about this the other day, and he's going to look into it as we were working through the potential adjustments with AEAF. And it's like, so the verbiage in those stability levers, those AEA codes, it says force comm. And again, you guys are doing tag teams, so Europe was asking the same thing, which is like, well, how do we use those stability codes for our NCOs? So whether it's 2CR or 173rd, if it applies, right? So when you think about a crew, being an old tanker, I think of a tank. I was a enlisted artillery, so I think of a howitzer or a paladin. You know what I mean? So you think about those things as crews. Well, the 25th, I'm sure, has a crew of some sort, right? And the MOSs that we are looking at with the 11s, 12, 13, moving into 14s and 19s, right? So,
and this is really come up with 425.
So we're kicking it around, and Colonel Harris was going to look at it again to make sure that if it's expanded, then what does that mean, and making sure that it fits. I think that was Friday. So.
And I know we're working it through the Staff Sergeant Recalibration, OPT, but that's where the mixed messaging, because when these flags go out to the field and everybody's like, as Colonel McGregor said, hey, we need the field to get after crew stabilization. Well, that's a lot different messaging than we need force comm to get after it, because the field includes user pack, but when we go to do it at HRC, it doesn't include user pack.
No, that's another great point. We'll get with Brian Harrison, in our Combat Arms Division. We'll work through that and then just make sure that our messaging across the board makes sense. So I appreciate it. We'll now move on to the 5th gold bar, and this is just kind of an update to make sure everybody, as we travel around and do our road show, this is one of the ones that I just bring up to make sure that everybody's on the same sheet of music and everybody's tracking. So, as a colonel, as a colonel, lieutenant colonel, if I choose not to compete for CSL, what happens to me? Basically nothing, right? I get to go on and do some other job, and I get to stay in the Army and get to continue to serve my country. So, but as a sergeant major who chose not to maybe compete for a command sergeant major or wanted to retain as a sergeant major, in the past, if I did that, what happened to me? I was asked to leave the Army, on the first day of the 7th month after I declined, correct? So, we went back to the sergeant major of the Army this year. We said, what, sergeant major, that's really kind of not fair. It's kind of two different standards. So, we'd like to maybe pilot something that says we change that this year and make a change. And he was like, nope, I agree with you 100%. So this year we made 3 changes to the CSL slating for sergeants major. First of those was that if you chose not to compete for CSL, or you chose, quote unquote, to remain as a sergeant major when you did your preferencing, then we would allow you to do that. And again, when we messaged this year, you would have thought that we were, changing the entire way we manage sergeants major. And we got tons of cards and love letters. But what I will tell you is, if I was to ask you what percentage of the folks do you think of sergeants major, what percentage of sergeants major chose not to compete for CSL this year, or to retain as a sergeant major and not be looked at for CSM? What do you think that percentage was?
6%.
Hey, who said that? That must be my JROTC guy. It is.
Nope.
So 6%, only 6% of our sergeants major this year said, hey, you know what? Not the right time in my life, not the right time in my career to compete, and so I'd rather not compete this year. And you know what the number 1 and number 2 reasons were? Number 1 was EFMP stability. Most of them came back and said, some of them came back and said, hey, I just got continuity of care for my EFMP. I'd really like to stay put for another couple years to kind of continue that continuity of care. And then the second one was, I have ailing parents, and I kind of like to be able to stay near my ailing parents. They won't be around for a couple more years, and I'd like to kind of be here with them. So in the past, what would we have done with those 2 different circumstances? We would have said, well, that's great. Take care of your family, take care of your FMP, but you're going to retire in 6 months and have a great life. Not necessarily the greatest ambassadors for our Army probably after that. And so Sergeant Major agreed with us. And so that was one of the adjustments we made this year. So if you chose not to compete for CSL or for CSM, you could retain as a Sergeant Major and continue to serve. Again, we'll watch that percentage over the next couple of years, make sure that doesn't slide up. But we think it'll kind of remain relatively stable. The second one was we reduced the term from 30 months to 24 months to coincide with our officer counterparts. And then the third part was that we now do CSL slating twice a year to kind of tighten that shot group over the 6 months. Because what we found was when we did the slating for a year, we had a lot of changes, many more changes than what we did this year when we did the twice a year slating. So we think those are great news stories. Again, I just like to bring those up to make sure that everybody's tracking that those changes were made this year. And then the last piece on the gold bar chart there is the EFMP. Again, two big things with that. Number one, right now we have about 42,000 EFMPs across all of our FORSCOM units. Of those 42,000, at any given time, 6 to 7% of those are expired. So if I have an NCO who goes through the entire marketplace, preferences, does everything he's supposed to, he or she does everything they're supposed to do, come out of that marketplace, and you have an expired EFMP, I cannot move you. Now, that may be great if you're sitting in Indo-PACOM and you're over in Hawaii or someplace where you want to stay. I see your hand. I'll get to you in just a second. That's great if you're there and you don't want to leave, because then you're not going to update your EFMP and I get to stay there for 5 years. Not necessarily great for readiness across our Army. So what I would do is request your assistance in making sure that those EFMPs get updated. And I know during COVID in the past 18 months that's been a challenge. But what I would tell you to do, or what I would ask you to do, is continue to just push those soldiers to get their EFMP updated. And I'll stop there before I go to my second point and answer your question. Go ahead.
So here's the problem I have, sir. Again, Sir Major Neal. So that EFMP expired number is not particularly accurate. And here's the problem that we have. There's 3 conditions in the medical field that, even though they are expired, meaning no longer enrolled in EFMP, the HR system shows that they're expired, need to be renewed. But the soldier is actually disenrolled, but they have to still maintain EFMP on the record because they meet one of the 3 criteria: cancer, behavior, health, and I can't remember the third one right now. So from an HR perspective, it looks like that they have an expired EFMP. So I beat up my formations to go and update. And when I pull the roster and actually look at the ones that are truly expired versus disenrolled, it's an entirely different percentage. So I think that from the medical to the HR perspective, we are missing a handshake, because our system is black or white. It's expired or not. It doesn't show expired, disenrolled. And I think that's hurting the field, and especially when you put the numbers out with expired, that's not accurate with Indo-PACOM AOR.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. What we like to say is that it's trying to get out of EFMP is like trying to get out of Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. And we know that's a challenge. And we are working closely with the G9 and the Army G9 and with our MedCom folks to adjust that, because what should happen is as soon as you come out from under the EFMP program or you are disenrolled, then that should completely take you out of the program. The challenge is that right now it doesn't. And it takes forever for one of our NCOs to fall off, or one of our soldiers to fall off that system. And again, there are safeguards in place for good purposes, to where you can't move in and out of the program based on assignment or whatever it is. And that's some of the safeguards that were put in place by MedCom to make sure we couldn't do that just so you could drop and then come back in, drop and come. And we get all that. And that's not really the challenge we're seeing right now. What we're seeing is, excuse me, is that there are legitimate EFMPs that have either been, resolved and don't need to be in the program anymore, period. And we're having a challenge getting them out of the program. So that's what we've gone back to MedCom with and are working closely with them to help resolve as well. So we appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead.
And we're tracking, and I know that we've been working with your team up there and the folks, Ron Neal over at EFMP and then Army G9, particularly with a pilot that we're trying to look at and how to leverage and improve the process, especially from an OP and EP perspective with EFMP, because we know we get the second look if they're actually going OCONUS, which disrupts EP or the EMC and AIM. And so we've been working closely to try to resolve this from an internal perspective, working with your agencies. I know it's a complex problem, but that's one of the things that they keep beating up with the expired and how do we get after with limited audience. I know Korea is hard to get EFMP there, but we still need the manpower. So it's a constant battle.
Well, no, I completely understand, and I empathize with you completely. And so we are definitely working closely with those two entities. I mean, as you well know, I mean, a lot of times, you know, John Finke and his team get beat up for, you know, not approving EFMPs or not approving, you know, he gets beat up for everything EFMP. And a lot of times what folks don't understand in the field is that we're just as much a customer as you are. So we're really doing what Army G9 and what, you know, and what MedCom, you know, they're the ones who feed us the information and allow us to make those decisions. So, Sergeant Major Gaskin, I see that you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, sir. Sergeant Major Gaskin, 7th ID.
Yeah, how are you?
My question was, we actually have a sergeant major that declined a brigade command sergeant major position, and it just got signed literally 5 days ago. And
Okay.
he understands that, you know, his retirement will come effect one day after the 7th month of the notification, which was 11 August. So
Sure.
hearing this news, do we have an option to pull that paperwork back and get him another assignment, or is it a done deal at this point?
No, because the challenge is that he competed in the market.
Okay.
So he competed and said, I'd like to serve as a command sergeant major. And the challenge that you have is by doing that, then when the slate comes out, you're really declining with prejudice. And
Track.
so that prejudice at that point becomes the fact that now, because you're really declining to PCS, and so that causes you to have to retire on the first day of the 7th month. If he had chosen going into the board, if he had said, you know, I'd like to retain as a sergeant major and not necessarily compete as a CSM, then he would have been fine. But the fact that he competed, really what it comes back to, the way Big Army looks at it is, you competed, you didn't like what you got, and so now you don't want to, you know, you want to decline. Well,
Okay,
that comes with prejudice, just like it does on the officer side. So the officers have the same challenge.
Okay, tracking on. Appreciate it, sir.
And then my second part on EFMP is just, this is just for your edification. Again, we are really the customer when it comes to the entire EFMP process. And so, you know, when we get those 5 preferences from an EFMP at the end of a marketplace, John Finke and his team will actually take those 5 preferences and run those top 5 to make sure, you know, which one of those we can clear. You know, what we do now is we either email, you know, make phone calls, we carrier pigeon, whatever it takes to get that thing approved, right? So what we've actually done as a smart group of my folks here in EP, have kind of like almost like DTS, you know, when you put your information into DTS and it just goes through an automated workflow, you don't know where it goes, you just know in 2 or 3 days it comes back and it's approved, right? Or disapproved. That's kind of what we've done on the backside of the EFMP process here, is built an automated workflow that'll speed up our ability to clear those posts a whole lot quicker. And so hopefully you'll start seeing that process move a little bit more expeditiously. And we're implementing that hopefully next month in October of 2021. So we'll keep you posted on that. We think that's going to be a great news story. It's called Web EFMP. And really what it does, again, is just automate that workflow on the backside for us here in trying to clear those post-camps and stations for you. So again, this is the Enlisted YMAP. Again, just a great reference tool for you on that. Next slide. And then another great reference tool for stability and predictability opportunities for you. I know we're kind of running out of time here. So the reason I like to show you this slide is because this is my chance to ask for your assistance. So, you know, in the field, the CSA and the SMA will get, you know, RFIs all the time from the field that say, hey, we'd like, as an NCO, I'd like to stay in place, you know, 36 months or more. And so we get those RFIs down here and we always send a chart back that says, sir, we're already doing that. So if you look at the upper left-hand corner, total time on station right now, on average, our NCOs are staying in place about 43 to 45 months. So we're already meeting that 3 years time on station. Now, does that mean that's on average? So does that mean that every NCO gets to stay on camp post or station that long? No. There are going to be some that move earlier, but on average, we're actually meeting that time frame. So that's just my way of dispelling rumors. And so I'd ask for your assistance in spreading that word as well. And then the other one is, you know, the upper right-hand corner is, you know, we always get beat up because HRC moves people just to move people. And as you all know, as HR professionals, that's not the case. If somebody's moving, there's a reason. But this pie chart up here in the upper right-hand corner will help me. You can help me dispel that rumor as well. So if you look at that chart, the big orange piece and the big gold piece, those together are over 50% of all moves on a yearly basis. And those two I have no control over in EP whatsoever. The big orange piece is separations, which are retirements and just natural separations for other reasons, ETSs. And then the gold piece is reenlistment. As you well know, if somebody's going to reenlist to go somewhere, we are normally going to honor that. And so for location of choice. And so I have nothing to say over that. So when you really look at that pie chart, the control piece that I have is the moves that I control on a yearly basis is really that big gray section, which are CONUS PCSs. And what I can tell you is most of those CONUS PCSs are for DASSER and drill sergeant to move in and out of the DASSER and drill sergeant program. And so really, when you look at the number of moves that EP does on a yearly basis that are not spurred by anything or not caused by anything else, the percentage is very, very low. So I just ask you to help me spread the word on that HRC, I promise, does not move people just to move people. Okay. So before we go to the next slide, so when we started looking at how to market the whole ASCA marketplace, we knew we had to come up with something catchy, and so I was driving into work one day and I thought, how could we catch people's attention with ASCA, right? So I thought, you know what? You want to know what NCOs want? Ask them. You like that? Come on now. I want to hear some laughing out there. That's great. So this kind of gives you just a quick update on the entire ASCA marketplace. And you can see at the bottom, I've provided all the stats there for you for all the markets that we've held. You can see the number of preferences. You can see the number of top 5 that folks got. And really, this will kind of be a great, another great reference point for you. Things I like to point out on this slide is number 1, the big bumper sticker at the top. And General Edwards liked to say this in reference to the AIM marketplace, but it provides, or it's just as applicable to the ASCA marketplace. And that is in the last 22 months, we've changed the HR enterprise more than we have the past 40 years. Truthfully, that is the case. And as you know, out in the field as HR professionals, you can attest to that. One of the big points I like to point out on here is the end state of the ASCA marketplace. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner. 4 things there, really. Number 1, it's a disciplined market. We don't pull people in and out of that market. We don't pull recs in and out of that market willy-nilly. If we're going to add recs, it's for a purpose. And if we're going to add personnel or pull personnel, it's going to be for a purpose. Number 2, it maximizes predictability. Number 3, and this is the big point I like to point out to our NCOs and to our S1 and G1s across the Army. And that is that it optimizes readiness and preference. If you notice, it puts both of those on the same plane. So neither one of those will outweigh the other. So if it comes down to a point where I have to choose or make a decision between optimizing readiness in a certain location or meeting an NCO's preference, I can tell you readiness will probably always win. Okay. And again, that's just to make sure, as you well know, Army readiness is the number 1 priority, and we will always optimize that in conjunction with preference. And then last but not least is it always supports professional development. Again, the other point I like to bring out there is it's a bridge DIPSE, our first marketplace, hopefully will be in FY22, and we'll take what that marketplace looks like. Again, just some great metrics there for you. Again, you can share those with your units as necessary. So if I was to ask you coming out of the marketplaces, what are, I see a hand, go ahead.
This time, Major Mack, I thought you were finished with the last slide. I was going to make a couple comments before the time ran out. If you got something else, just please finish putting that out. And I got a couple comments to make.
Okay. We'll finish up here and then we'll just take a couple comments or we'll take a couple questions and then we'll let you close it out. Sorry, Major McAdoo. So if I was to ask you, coming out of the marketplace, and this is very similar to AIM, if I was to ask you what what our bottom 5 garden spots of the Army are, you could probably answer those relatively quickly. So next slide. So as you can see, it's the same as it is for the AIM marketplace. Normally in the bottom ones that we have, challenges with are Fort Drum, Fort Polk, Riley, Irwin, and then normally it's Korea. In this case, Fort Huachuca fell into that bottom piece out of our last market. We show this slide not because that means that that's how talent is distributed or anything like that. The biggest thing we like to show this slide for is because if you are in one of those bottom, 5 to 10 garden spots of the Army, that means that you have a bigger challenge in marketing your location, right? To bring great talent or to entice people to come to your location. That's the reason we show this. And a lot of times, what I will tell you is I just visited Fort Drum a couple weeks ago, and I had never been there before, and I, of course, fell prey to all of the I'd say bad PR that Drum gets. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's 50 feet of snow every year and you have to plug in your car, otherwise it dies. And, all those rumors that you hear, right? But what it truly showed, I went up and visited, and that place is great. I wish I had been stationed there, sometime over my 28-year career. But again, sometimes it's just for those locations, it's just the marketing and it's dispelling the rumors that are out there that have been around for 40 years. Fort Bliss, for example, that poor place, everybody went there before they went to Afghanistan, Iraq. And so it became like, oh my God, this place is horrible. You go there and that place has got some of the best facilities that I've ever seen on any post. And so again, it's just dispelling those rumors. And what I tell units in these areas is that you can help dispel those rumors by doing some great marketing on your website and some other places. So just help us with that if you could. Again, if you've not, you can use these slides as reference. For those who've never been through a marketplace, these are really good slides just to kind of share. And it kind of walks you through the enlisted marketplace. Big thing I like to point out on this page is, if the TMTF would tell us that in a marketplace that it's an open marketplace, that I shouldn't provide any guidance to NCOs who go into the marketplace. It's free and open. They should be able to do what they want to. If I'm one of those NCOs who's never been to Hawaii and I always wanted to go to Hawaii, even though it might not be career enhancing, if I put Hawaii 1 through 150, guess what? You're probably going to get to go to Hawaii. But what I will tell you is we don't do that in EP. So my team still goes in, my PD NCOs will still go in and provide each one of those NCOs their thought process on where they think they need to go, what jobs they need to move into, and what they think is career enhancing. And the reason we do that is because what advantage do my PD NCOs have that you folks in the field and that sometimes that NCO doesn't have? They are able to take and look at you in comparison with the entire population and see exactly what you need to do to be successful. Now, as an NCO, I can take that career guidance and I can go, that's great, I'm going to follow that. Thank you for giving that to me. Or I can look at that career guidance and go, you know what? I've really always wanted to go to Hawaii and I'd still like to go there. So I'm putting that 1 through 150 and I'll probably get to go. But again, we think it's only fair that we provide that guidance to NCOs across the Army. And we do that on the opening page when the NCO first clicks on the link that we send them in an email. And this is the first page they see. Once they go through that, this is actually the preferencing portion of the market. If you've never seen that, this is exactly how they preference 1 through however many. Normally we recommend that they at least preference about 70 to 75% of the spots that are out there, because if you only give me 1 through 4 preference, guess what number 5 becomes? 5 becomes 1 through 150, or 5 through 150. So again, you can look at that on your time and you can see that. The other thing that came out of the pilot that our NCOs really liked was the popularity meter on the right-hand side. And what that shows is how popular that assignment is, or that location is in the marketplace. And they thought that was very helpful in enabling them to make decisions as well. Next slide. So once you go through that process, you'll get a printout. Actually, you'll get a confirmation email that shows what that looks like. Now, a lot of times what we find is NCOs go in preference, and then they realize they actually picked Fort Bliss #1 when they really wanted to pick Hawaii #1. And so they'll go back and make changes. You can make changes up until the time the market closes. Just make sure that you save that to where all your preferences are actually put in there correctly. And now I'll kind of open it up. I know we only probably have about 4 or 5 minutes left, but we'll open it up. And then Sergeant Major, if you want to close out, we'll let you do that as well.
Hey, sir, Sergeant Major Clark. Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Hey, sir, in addition to the opportunities that we granted for Sergeant Majors to be able to opt in or out, if you will, for competing for Command Sergeant Major or competing for Staff Sergeant Major, can you also elaborate for the group on the option we gave for Master Sergeant's ability to opt out of going to the Sergeant Major Academy?
Yeah, let me get somebody who can actually talk that, just to make sure I don't mess that one up. But so let me find somebody who can do that real quick, and I'll get them on here.
While you're looking, sir, just on behalf of the Sergeant's Major, can we post the files the brief that you just shared with us so that we can disseminate it to the Sergeant's Major?
Most definitely.
All right, looks like we got about 2 minutes left. It's Sergeant Major Mack. I'm sure nobody's asking any questions because they want to hear what I got to say. Probably not. Hey, but just from our Fox up here, when it comes to Ask EM, as a CGNIs, we continue to travel the world and talk to senior mission commanders. We got to make sure that Ask EM, we're messaging Ask EM correctly, because I keep getting the confusion with the Army senior leaders is that, hey, we can't get the fields that we need because everyone is getting their top 5%. Obviously, the Ask EM tool is a great thing. It's there to open up and show what positions are out there, but also shows the amount of positions. So please let your senior leaders know that it is for the purpose of soldiers being able to see what positions are out there, the positions that they could possibly get. There are a bunch of factors whether or not that they get it, but the preference, if readiness is of the utmost importance, that's where it is at. So they're not being, if they think that they are not being filled to where they should be filled because that soldiers are not purposely to ask them, please educate them and let them know that is not the case. The second thing is we talked about the Y maps earlier, and I will kind of put stop on a few of the things that Colonel McGregor said. Yes, I love the Y map as being out in the field before because it does give you predictability. Yes, as everything else, things are going to always change, but it is your projection. And Sergeant Major Neal, I appreciate your comments, reference how the DROS and the YMAV are not synced, along with a couple of other things. We'll absolutely look at that. So I know you heard the term a lot of time here talking about OPT, and I would ask everyone on this line to hold us accountable for providing the results of those OPTs, because those are absolutely valid. And I know the YMAVs are completely important to you all in the field to be able to help your leadership shape their formation, so as they go forward. We talked about the web EFMP. We have a lot of confusion going on in the field when it comes to EFMP. So I just want to let you all know this web EFMP thing we're talking about is an internal mechanism that we have in HRC for it to make it a little easier to process stuff internally. So I don't want any confusion out in the field with another EFMP product that everyone seems to think they need to go to. They are working on the EFMP issue external to HRC. We continue to push when we talk about the expired EFMPs, because really that is really only the part of the EFMP process that we can control. And that's just allowing our leadership the opportunity to let them know these are the ones that are expired EFMP and trying to encourage them to get their personnel to update their EFMP so we can make assignments. There are a lot of things going on, reference medical care and all the kind of things that are outside of our control. But what we can control is just providing the leadership those expired EFMPs are trying to get to the left of it, to make sure they're able to do that. So appreciate everyone on the line here. Just please continue to go back and educate your senior mission leadership. And I only bring that up because every time that I travel to different locations, I have to explain what the Ask EM, I have to explain kind of the Y map. I would assume that they already knew, but it's better for you to all educate them and let them know that if we are under strength, we are not under strength because no one chose our location. We under strength, what it's got to do with the ACMG, all kind of other things, but it's not because no one preferenced that location. So with that, I'll bring it back to you, Colonel McGregor.
Hey, CSM McAdoo, it's Mr. Keolis. How are you?
You know how I'm doing, sir.
Yeah, I know you're doing great. Hey, I just want you to know that there's some insiders here in the room, like an Atkinson, a Wilson, and a Clark. And after today's conference, we're all going for a 7-miler. We wish you were here.
Oh, he'll call up.
Yeah, good times.
So, sorry, Major Clark, I just kind of ran down with SMMD on the, on the question that you had. And I think you were probably tracking, but just for everybody's edification. So that's one of the things that as we walk through, attendees for Class 73 this year is, just running into different things with SMAP and, adjustments that we're making. And then challenges we're seeing with OML and things like that as we move through this process. And one of the questions that the team did ask was, hey, maybe in the future, we might, reach out to master sergeants before we even start slating for the class and just say, hey, are you interested in even attending the class? And kind of make it like we talked about before, for the to remain as a sergeant major or to compete for CSL, would kind of do the same thing, because what we're finding in this group as we move through, the slating process for those that will attend, USASMA, is that we are finding that there's NCOs who don't even want to compete or don't want to attend the course. And so I think that'll probably be something, as you're probably tracking, Sir Major Clark, that we'll bring to your attention and kind of walk you through that. But that just came up this week as we started to look at slating for the next USASMA class. So no, I appreciate you bringing it up, and more to follow on that. So thank you. Any other questions or concerns out there, folks? Okay. Well, again, thank you for taking time to spend with EP this afternoon. I see you, Tony. Thanks for taking time to spend with us this afternoon. And again, we never claim an EP to have all the right answers and all the right, resolutions to every problem out there. And so when you bring those to us, I can guarantee you this, though, the team will work those through an OPT or whatever we need to come to resolution on those. So thanks for bringing up those points. And I've taken notes. We'll send those back to the team, and we appreciate you providing us that input, because again, we don't know it all up here, and 9 times out of 10, we don't know a challenge exists in the field until you bring it to our attention. So thank you for your feedback, and thanks for helping us spread the great message out there. And we look forward to seeing you as we travel around the Army. Enjoy the rest of your time there at the conference. Thank you.
That I have right now is if you plan and they put my NCOs in the market based upon YMAV, they opted not to move them and they instead adjusted the YMAV. Nowhere in there was the DROS adjusted. So now I'm on HR metrics for a busted DROS because we didn't get communicated back that this soldier is not going to move. And so now I'm either overpopulated because somebody's programmed to come because the DROS is busted, and now we have to do an IFSTE on the individual. So we're constantly catching up because we don't know this person is not going to be slated in market. And so I either have to get Charlie Siegel in to change it if it's outside of my ETP authority, or we constantly are playing catch up with DROS management because it's not a must move date. That is just that's the earliest they're eligible to move. So whether you talk DROS or YMAV, it's still, but HRC is adjusting the YMAVs. They are not adjusting the DROS.
So what's interesting in that is we are looking to distribute people 6 to 9 months out, right? So if somebody doesn't get slated and F2'd in the market, then that should give you time and space to go, well, hey, wait, what just happened? You know, that individual, that sergeant, or that NCO, if they were pushed into another market, it would seem like there'd be some ability to go in there and say, well, we need to adjust the DROS, or you're essentially a volunteer, maybe, to go in and adjust it, rather than an involuntary.
But
Yes,
the way,
no?
in theory, however, we are limited by AR, and that authority lies with HRC. And that's where we go back between officers and enlisted. For officer, I have the authority. For enlisted, I don't, unless they're within my 60-day ETP window.
So, but if an individual volunteers to extend to go into the next market, you're
That
saying
is
that
an
they can't do it.
HRC authority to change the DROS, not mine.
Yeah, but okay, I agree. But they volunteer, paperwork comes up, and then we would execute the change.
But I'm not talking about the voluntary FSTE. I'm talking about strictly marketplace move, and HRC does not slate them in market. Because we've had plenty of it. So now I either have to get the soldier to voluntarily do an FSTE, or I have to do an IFST action on them because the YMAT's already been adjusted. HRC said, hey, we're going to push them to the next marketplace. And that's not something that was communicated down through the one channel. Maybe that talent manager and HRC had a conversation with the NCO. But that's why I say we're doing dual transactions, because they did that YMAT stuff, and which is great. But they don't do the DROS stuff, which then leads, we're doing duplicative work at the S1 level for an action that HRC did without us.
So, so Colonel McGregor, so maybe that's part of the OPT that looks at DROS and YMAV, and from the career division perspective, if someone isn't slated and they're an OCONUS, then that triggers a follow-on action, you know, to get to your point. So with Colonel McGregor's early comments about, you know, like going into the markets and everything, we continue, like literally, I'll call it discovery learning. And it's like, you know, with every market, we've made some level of adjustments and uncovered or discovered, you know, things like this. And quite frankly, this was literally in the, we were having this discussion up until last Friday, you know, about the two. Yeah, what's up, sir?
No, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, great point. Thank you for bringing that up, and we will take that back to the OPT. I think the big thing to remember is, you know, this is kind of building the plane in flight, and I know you hear that a lot in the HR arena, but it literally is, you know, building the plane in flight. And so as we are building that, if there's You know, if you see a wing starting to fall off, or if you see some landing gear, you know, land somewhere where it's not supposed to, please bring it to our attention, because that's the only way that we know that there's a challenge out there somewhere. And this is a perfect example. You know, our PD NCOs know that when they go in and adjust the YMAV, that's great. But then that follow-on action would be either contacting you or us going and making a change to the DROS as well. So great point. We'll take that back to the OPT, and we definitely appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
I talked to, we tag team you all on that, by the way. But, you know, and the same problem that they have in USRAF is when we do an FSTE or an IPCOT, or even an ITT IPCOT, moving to another location, and I'll use Korea, we have authority to do it as long as they're not on assignment. We change the DROS, that doesn't change their YMAP, and so they're slated. And so now it's a false slating in the market that FORCECOM may be looking at, hey, this person's going to be available, and they're really not. And so that's why we keep saying that these two, because they're not married together properly, we're continuing to have readiness issues across the force, because every time we extend them in Korea, it's going to impact the HAP that they have coming back to a FORCECOM entity. And so there's a larger picture here, and that's why you know, we spend a lot of times talking to USRAF. I know they're not here, but nesting this to make sure that we have the same problems, or is it just a Indo-PACOM versus a UCOM issue?
So we also had that same discussion, and I call it pulling the string all the way through. Not only on the DROS piece, but right now when we look at what we call revised OPER, it is how we take a look at the operational strength in a particular unit. So when I look at everybody in this room and I say, okay, you're in, pick a unit. Right now, we don't use YMAV as a way to say, well, what's the strength of that unit, you know, in 1 year based on YMAV? Because if we built requirements to that, then requirements go up. I already don't have the inventory to meet my current requirements. So what we do is right now is we don't use YMAV, we use ETS dates, retirement dates, and all the other, literally, there's actually algorithms that say, let's see, so Clark is a sergeant, and his MOS is X, and based on historic information, we believe that the propensity that he is going to ETS is X, or re-enlist is Y. And so the machine does forecasting that if he hasn't done a retention action, the machine's trying to, again, with historic information, forecast his loss. Why do we have to keep doing that? Because if he's a sergeant, he doesn't have a YMAV. You know what I mean? So getting into looking at YMAV, looking at DROS, the impact on not only the market